At my son's wedding, no one pinned the father of the groom boutonniere on my chest. Instead, they handed me an orange paper wristband. Printed on it were the words, "Standing room, only no catering." I stood there inside a multi-million-dollar mansion in Newport, like someone who wasn't supposed to be there at all. My son leaned in close and whispered, "Dad, stand in the back, okay? It fits better there." In that moment, I understood a cold contradiction. I spent my whole life raising someone to step into the light, only to be pushed into the shadows myself. Before I go on, please subscribe to the channel, tap like, and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. Now, let me tell you what happened right after that moment. I didn't ask why. At 72, I've learned how to understand the things people never say out loud. The paper wristband brushed against my skin every time I moved. So light it should have meant nothing, yet heavy enough to remind me I didn't belong here. I looked around the reception hall. Tailored suits, dresses without a single wrinkle, smiles practiced in front of mirrors. No one looked at me for more than a second. I came here with one simple belief, that no matter what, today I was the groom's father. I carried a small wooden box with me. Inside was an old Rolex watch, the only thing I kept when I sold the restaurant. It once belonged to the first man who taught me how to cook. He used to say, "Time in the kitchen never comes back, so you'd better use it right." I thought Jackson would understand that. I thought it might help him stand a little firmer inside his wife's family. But at the check-in table, the young woman only looked at her list. She never raised her head. No boutonniere, no greeting. Just the orange paper wristband placed on my wrist, quick and efficient, like handing out parking tickets. I stood there for a few seconds, waiting for a mistake to be corrected. Nothing happened. Elena was standing behind me. She received the same wristband. I turned to her. She smiled that familiar smile from when she was little. The one that says, "It's okay, Dad. I can take it." I said nothing. I just nodded as if everything were going exactly as planned. Jackson appeared a short while later. He wore a dark suit, perfectly fitted, expensive enough that I knew it wasn't cheap. He didn't hug me. He didn't ask if the trip was tiring. He leaned in close, his voice low enough that no one else could hear. He asked me to understand. He said his wife's family needed space for important people. He said standing in the back was still a good view. I looked at my son's face, a face I had watched for 32 years. From a red-faced newborn in a cramped rental apartment, to the man standing in front of me, now confident, built on distance. I didn't see cruelty. I saw embarrassment, covered up with reasonable explanations. I walked slowly toward the back of the hall. The music was softer there. The lights were dimmer. Everyone around me wore the same wristband. Servers passed by with trays of food. Their eyes slid over me the way you glance at a pillar in the room. I wasn't hungry. My throat just felt dry. Elena came to stand beside me. She asked if I was okay. I said I was. Lying at this age doesn't bother me anymore. What bothered me was realizing this. I taught my son how to walk into a room, but I forgot to teach him how to turn back. I looked toward the gift table. The wooden box in my hand suddenly felt heavier. I thought about setting it down, turning around, and leaving. But I knew, if I did, that everything would end in silence. And silence sometimes is the easiest way to bury things. I stepped forward before I could change my mind. I called Jackson's name. He turned around a little surprised. I placed the box into his hands, then pulled back. I spoke slowly, loud enough for him to hear, soft enough to avoid attention. I told him I had spent my entire life laying the foundation for him, that what he was standing on today didn't appear on its own. Then I added calmly that it seemed he only wanted to build walls to keep me outside. Jackson didn't answer right away. He glanced around as if afraid someone might hear. Then he said, "We would talk later." I nodded. I took the box back and slipped it into my jacket pocket. I wasn't angry. I just felt a door closing, quietly, but for good. The ceremony began. I stood in the back exactly where I'd been told to stand. When Jackson and Beatrice walked out, the entire hall rose. The applause came steady and long. I clapped too, not because I was happy, but because I didn't want to become the one thing that didn't fit. Beatrice passed by. Her eyes moved over me the way you look at an old object placed in the wrong corner, not annoyed, not curious, just unnecessary. I looked at Elena. She clapped more slowly, her eyes never leaving me. In that moment, I knew I wasn't completely alone. But I also understood something else, even more clearly. From today on, the The blood bond I once believed was irreplaceable had begun to be measured by usefulness. The paper wristband was still there. I didn't take it off. I let it remind me that everything I do from now on will no longer be built on the hope of being acknowledged. It will be built on the truth I saw, right there at my own son's wedding. The ceremony moved on like a film where I was no longer the main character. When everyone shifted toward the dinner area, I stayed at the edge of the hall, the paper wristband damp with sweat. I didn't have a seat. I didn't look for one. Sometimes not pushing your way in lets you hear things more clearly. I listened to Jackson's speech. He talked about his rise, about people who had inspired him. He mentioned his father-in-law by full name, his tone respectful, calling him a model of success and stature. I stood behind a stone pillar a few dozen steps from the podium and realized my name didn't need to be forgotten. It had already been replaced. The music grew louder. Glasses clinked. I recognized faces from photos Jackson once sent me when he was in law school. Partners, mentors, people who were automatically considered important. No one knew who I was. And strangely enough, that made everything clearer. Elena took my hand and led me out to the back terrace. The sea wind came in cool and honest. She spoke softly, said she didn't want me standing in there anymore. I asked why. She didn't answer right away. She handed me her phone. On the screen was a long email. I read it slowly. The words were careful, cold, calculated. Jackson was writing to his mother, the woman who had left years ago, about the official guest list. One section said my presence was not aligned with the image and might distort the message. There was a clear suggestion. Place me in the standing area. Limit interaction. Let everything pass smoothly. I handed the phone back to Elena. I didn't ask anything else. Questions at that point would only stretch out what was already clear. I stood still, watching the ocean darken. Elena said she had found the email by accident while using Jackson's computer to print wedding documents. She said she almost deleted it, pretended she'd never seen it. But then, she thought of me. I thanked her. Just one sentence, nothing more. We went back inside. I returned to my spot. That was when I really noticed the mansion. The familiar language of wealth. Polished stone, heavy wood, high-hanging lights. I had seen these things before. Not at parties, but on invoices. I remembered the year Jackson called me. His voice, tired, urgent. He said he needed capital to start the right way. I sold the restaurant. I hid my name. I didn't want him to owe me anything. I remembered signing the transfer papers, the smell of the old kitchen still on my hands. I thought that money would help him stand steady. I never imagined it would buy a place where I wouldn't have a chair. A man stood beside me. He wore the same orange wristband. He asked if I knew where the restroom was. I pointed the way. We didn't say anything else. People like us usually know when silence is enough. Jackson walked past. He avoided my eyes. Beatrice was beside him. Her long dress brushed the floor. Her steps were confident. She didn't turn around. I didn't expect her to. Some people treat everything behind them as already handled. Elena asked if I wanted to leave. I shook my head. I told her I wanted to look carefully. She didn't ask again. She stood with me shoulder to shoulder. I felt that. Presence without explanation. When the night was nearly over, Jackson spoke again. This time, he talked about the future. About doors that would open. I listened, thinking of the doors that had already closed. No noise, no argument, just a decision made cleanly. I left the hall before everyone else did. No one noticed. Outside, I stopped and removed the paper wristband. It tore slightly at the edge. I folded it and placed it in my coat pocket. I didn't throw it away. Some things need to be kept to remember. Elena walked with me to the car. She asked what I planned to do next. I said I didn't know. That was the truth. But in my mind, a straight line had already begun to form. Clear, without detours. On the drive home, I thought about the wooden box. I thought about Jackson's eyes when I pulled my hand back. I thought about my signature on old papers, about the decisions I made because I believed one simple thing. That family was a place without conditions. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table, opened the box, and placed the watch in my hand. The hands were still moving, steady. Time doesn't take sides, but it always tells the truth. I understood that from today on, if there were ever another conversation between Jackson and me, it would no longer be built on hope. It would be built on choice. And every choice, even a silent one, leaves a mark. The next morning I left Newport early. The city was still quiet, as if last night had never happened. I carried the wooden box in my carry-on, not because of its value, but because I wanted to look straight at what I was about to do. On the drive home, Elena called. She asked if I was okay. I said I was. This time it wasn't a lie. That evening, just as I set the kettle on the stove, the doorbell rang. I wasn't surprised. Some things, once delayed long enough, know exactly when to knock. Jackson stood there, alone. No suit this time. His voice was lower. He didn't circle around it. He said he needed to talk. I opened the door. I didn't invite him in right away. I let him stand there for a few seconds, long enough for both of us to understand this was no longer a meeting between father and son as it used to be. Then I stepped aside. Jackson walked in, looked around the small apartment. He used to live here in high school. I saw something unfamiliar in his eyes, as if this place had become an address that no longer fit his new map. He asked about the watch. Said he hadn't seen me give the gift. His tone was calm, but I could hear the urgency underneath. He mentioned unfinished expenses, commitments that needed quick handling. He didn't say dad. He didn't say family. He said timing. I poured tea. I sat down. I told him to sit. I didn't interrupt. I let him finish. When he stopped, I placed the wooden box on the table between us. The light reflected off the glass. Jackson looked at it the way someone looks at a lifeline. I said I could give him the watch. I spoke slowly, one word at a time, but I added that before I did, I needed clarity. Jackson frowned. He asked clarity about what? I reached into the drawer and took out a sheet of paper. Not thick, not complicated, just a short agreement. I had written it the night before, while everything was still fresh and impossible to deny. I placed it next to the box. I told him this. If he wanted the gift, he would sign here, confirming that from now on I would be nothing more than a general admission guest in his life. No privileges, no responsibilities, no title beyond my name. I said this wasn't punishment. It was simply calling the relationship by the name he had already chosen. Jackson read it. He read fast. I saw his eyes skim past the important lines. He asked if it really had to go that far. I didn't answer right away. I looked straight at him and said that at my age, I don't have time left to live inside vague arrangements. I need to know where I stand. He exhaled. Said it was just a formality. Said everything would be fine. I nodded. I said if it was only a formality, then signing wouldn't cost him anything. Jackson looked at the watch, then at the paper. I didn't rush him. I waited. I've waited my whole life for many things. A few more minutes didn't make me weaker. In the end, he signed. The pen stroke was firm. No hesitation. He didn't look at me. I folded the paper, slid it into an envelope. I pushed the box toward him. Jackson took it quickly, as if afraid I might change my mind. He stood up. He said thank you. This time the words sounded exactly like what they were. A transaction completed. Before he reached the door, I said one more thing. I said I hoped he would use the gift the right way. Not to buy another door, but to learn how to close the ones that were no longer needed. Jackson didn't answer. He left. The door closed. I stayed seated. No relief. No pain. Just an empty space placed where it belonged. I picked up my phone. Elena had already sent a message. She asked if I needed anything. I called her back. I said it was done. She was quiet for a few seconds. Then she asked if I was sure. I said I was. I said I had seen what I needed to see. A few days later, Elena came by. She brought a folder with her. She said that while cleaning out her old computer, she found a video recorded that night. When Jackson signed. When I placed the box on the table. When everything was said clearly. She asked if I wanted to keep it. I said yes. Not to use right away, but to remind myself that some boundaries once drawn should not be erased just because they feel familiar. That night I opened the envelope and read the agreement again. Jackson's signature sat at the bottom. Clear, undeniable. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel loss. I only felt a truth written in ink instead of being pushed into silence. I placed the envelope in the drawer. I turned off the light. In the dark I understood that what had just happened was not an ending. It was simply the point where things began to move in the direction they had chosen. And from here on, every next step would no longer rest on assumptions. It would rest on what was chosen and what was signed. A week passed without another call from Jackson. I didn't reach out. I spent my time clearing the apartment, letting go of things I no longer used. Once boundaries are set, reordering a space becomes easier. Elena stopped by every afternoon helping me sort through old papers. We worked slowly. We didn't talk much. I didn't sell the watch. I didn't pawn it either the way Jackson had planned. I looked at it every morning, placing it on the kitchen table while making coffee. A reminder that some values should not be traded for temporary peace. I called an old friend from the neighborhood where I opened my first restaurant. We talked about a small auction, a fundraiser for the community center. No display, just the right place. Elena helped me prepare. She said we should keep everything simple. I agreed. We chose the common room, the one where I used to cook for neighbors during the holidays. The news spread faster than I expected. Not because of the watch, but because of the story behind it. I didn't tell the story. I only confirmed the time. On the day of the auction, I arrived early. I placed the watch in a small glass case under just enough light. I didn't stand next to it. I stood in the back. Familiar ground. Elena moved around, checking the list. She looked at me and nodded. I knew she was ready. The crowd wasn't large, but it was enough. Some faces I recognized, some I didn't. I heard whispered questions. I didn't interfere. When the time came, I stepped forward. I said a few short words about time, about how everyone chooses how to use it. I didn't mention the wedding. I didn't mention Jackson. Then I signaled Elena. She opened her phone and connected it to the screen. I looked out at the room and said that before we began, I wanted everyone to understand why this watch was here. I said it had once been used as a condition. I said I refused to accept that. The video started. I didn't look at the screen. I watched the reactions. There was murmuring, some frowns, some people turned to look at me. The clip was short, clear, Jackson signing, me placing the box on the table. No argument, no editing. When the video ended, the room fell silent. A kind of silence that explanations cannot fill. I added one more sentence. I said, this was not about shaming anyone. It was about transparency. I said I chose not to stay silent because silence is the fastest way for wrong things to become normal. I lowered my head and stepped back. The auction continued. The bids rose slowly but steadily. I didn't watch the amount. I watched Elena. She stood straight, calm. I knew she had made her choice a long time ago. When the gavel came down, the room applauded. Not loud. Enough. The news spread afterward. No need for my confirmation. Jackson's name appeared in conversations that weren't favorable. The image of the upright lawyer was questioned. I didn't follow it. Elena did. She didn't say much. Only that things had shifted. One afternoon, Elena told me she had messaged her brother. She said she wouldn't contact him anymore. Not out of resentment, but because she didn't want to stand in the middle of a relationship built on conditions. I nodded. I told her she had done the right thing. I received an email from an old acquaintance of Jackson's. Polite, asking if I wanted to talk privately. I deleted it. I didn't need to explain anything else. I had said enough. The money from the auction went straight into the community fund. I signed the papers. I felt light, not because I had won, but because I had put the right thing in the right place. I no longer held anything that could be used as leverage. A few days later, I walked through the old neighborhood. I stood in front of the common room, soon to become a cooking class. Elena was with me. She talked about schedules, about the children who would come. I listened. I saw another picture forming. A new kitchen table with no distinction between standing or sitting. That evening, Elena asked if I had any regrets. I thought for a moment. I said if I regretted anything, it was that I waited too long to name things as they were. But I didn't regret doing it. Some illusions need to be dismantled. Not to destroy anyone, but to give them a chance to build something else, if they choose to. I locked the classroom door, slipped the key into my pocket. I looked at Elena. She smiled, not forced. In that moment, I understood that what had collapsed was not just an image. It was a way of living, and from those ruins another table was being set. No paper wristbands, no sorting lists, just people still willing to sit down together. The cooking class opened on a windy morning. I arrived early out of old habit from my days on the line. The room didn't smell like food yet, only the sound of tables and chairs being set straight. Elena hung up the schedule, her handwriting neat. She turned and asked if I needed a break. I said not yet. I was still strong enough, and I wanted to be here when the first children walked in. They arrived one by one, some shy, some curious. I didn't ask about their backgrounds. I handed out aprons, showed them where to wash their hands. We started with simple things: how to hold a knife safely, how to listen to boiling water to know when to lower the heat. I spoke slowly. I didn't tell my life story. I let the kitchen speak for me. Elena stood nearby, taking notes, keeping time. I saw her in a new role, not as my protector, but as my partner. When the first meal was done, we sat down together. No standing areas, no categories, just a long table and enough chairs for everyone. I looked at those faces and thought, this is a table I can name. The days that followed moved at a steady pace. The noise outside faded. I didn't follow it. I focused on the rhythm of the kitchen. One day Elena mentioned that Jackson had lost a few clients. She didn't add anything else. I nodded. Some consequences don't need an audience. One late afternoon, after the class had ended, I saw a figure standing outside the glass door. I didn't need to look closely. I knew who it was. Jackson stood there, thinner, his shoulders slumped. He didn't knock. He waited. I dried my hands and looked through the glass for a moment. Elena looked at me. She didn't speak. I opened the door, but I didn't invite him in. Jackson said, "I'm sorry." Just 2 words. No explanation. No excuses. I listened. I asked why he had come. He said he wanted to talk. I nodded and pointed to a chair in the hallway. I didn't close the door. I didn't open it wider either. Jackson said he had been wrong. He said he chose the easiest path at the time. He said he hadn't understood the cost of what he was trading away. I didn't interrupt. When he stopped, I reached into my jacket and took out the orange paper wristband. I had kept it. I placed it in his hand. I told him I wasn't giving it to punish him. I gave it so he would remember what it feels like to be ranked. I said some doors once closed don't reopen the same way. But I added this: there are new tables, if someone is willing to sit down without conditions. Jackson looked inside the classroom. He saw the tables dusted with flour, the chairs not yet put away. He asked if he could come in. I thought for a moment. I said not today. I said when he was ready to sit like everyone else, no title, no priority, then he could come back. He nodded. He placed the wristband on the window ledge. He said he would return. I didn't promise anything. I closed the door gently. I didn't lock it. That evening, Elena asked if I had been too hard. I said being firm doesn't mean shutting everything tight. Being firm means keeping boundaries clear so no one gets hurt again. Elena nodded. She said she was proud of me. I said I was proud of her too. In the weeks that followed, the classes grew fuller. We added more sessions. I sold my apartment and moved to a smaller place near the community center. That decision didn't make me feel lacking. It made me lighter. I stopped holding on to things, just to prove something. One afternoon, Jackson came back. He didn't wait outside. He walked in, greeted everyone, asked for an apron. He sat at the table and listened. I gave him the simplest task: cutting vegetables. He worked slowly. I didn't correct much. I let him feel his way through it. When the class ended, Jackson stayed to clean up. He didn't speak. Neither did I. Before leaving, he said he would come back next week if I allowed it. I nodded. Nothing more. That night, I sat with Elena reviewing the schedule. She asked if I felt things were okay now. I thought for a moment and said this: okay isn't when every crack disappears. Okay is when people know where to stop and how to move forward. The final scene of that day was simple. I stood by the stove, showing Elena how to season a family dish. She followed along, a little clumsy. I adjusted gently. Outside, the glass streetlights cast their glow. No paper wristbands, no standing areas, just a working kitchen, and people willing to respect each other when they sit down. If this story made you pause and think, please subscribe to the channel, tap like, and share it so real family stories like this can keep being told. Thank you for staying until the very end. Your presence is what gives meaning to these simple tables.